around the nation. DYD Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Monday. It is the first full week that we have going into 2020. Or I'm sorry, actually being in 2020. So we got a first full week of the year and kind of exciting. Okay, so now we've got just a lot of stuff to talk about. Mainly, of course, we're going to talk about Soleimani, the attack, of course, possible war with Iran, et cetera, stuff related to that, including, you're going to love this story, Fox News loves the deep state. Fascinating. I love that story. It's awesome. Now, first, of course, we're going to do a little bit of breaking news. We're going to talk about John Bolton, and will he be the one to try to take down Donald Trump? Fascinating. Then we're going to talk about Trump's sanctions, possibly wanting to put sanctions on Iraq. So I'm not kidding. So we'll get into that. Then we have interesting reporting from the Gray Zone about what Soleimani might have actually been doing when he was attacked by a U.S. drone, killed by a U.S. drone. So that is really, really interesting. And then we have some war powers resolutions going down in the House. I'm going to break that down, who brought it, and of course, why right now it's theater. So fascinating. All right, so we got a lot of that. We also have some other breaking news. For example, just to look here, Harvey Weinstein has been indicted on sex crimes. So this is happening in an LA court. The indictment just came out hours after the start of Weinstein's separate New York trial on similar charges. According to Axios, the LA County District Attorney's Office said Weinstein would be charged with rape and sexual assault of two women back in 2013. So that's very interesting. In the New York trial alone, Weinstein faces a maximum of 25 years in prison. He also faces the charge of predatory sexual assault for committing a serious sex crime against more than one person, which could carry a life sentence. None of which, now remember, these are just indictments. Weinstein is very rich and very powerful. So look, I don't know. I'm very skeptical when people try to hold a rich person accountable, because we've seen what happens. We've seen that these people often tend to get much smaller sentences than any normal person would. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see if this goes to trial or whatever. But there are indictments, and so that's really interesting. All right, there's that. We got a couple of small campaign notes as well. In the 2020 primary, Julian Castro, who just recently dropped out, has endorsed Elizabeth Warren. That should be no surprise. A lot of people were saying, well, hopefully he would, get smart and endorse Bernie Sanders. He did not. I should say I'm not at all surprised of the choice of endorsing Elizabeth Warren. Could have been worse. He could have endorsed Biden. Yikes. And then one more. One more story here. So we have a late entrance into the race. It appears that our old friend Lincoln Chafee is back in the race. Those of you who watched the show back in 2015, 2016, you guys remember that we were big fans of Lincoln Chafee back here and on this show. Feel the chafe. So I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding. But really, he is running. But this time, interestingly enough, he has chosen to run as a libertarian. Fascinating. So Lincoln Chafee back in the race as a libertarian, which, again, at least he chose the more correct party that aligns with him and his views. If only there were certain Democrats or people running as Democrats that would actually go in with their correct party. Like, for example, Joe Biden should run as a Republican. I've said that before. And look, I think a lot of you might actually agree. Because look, he's basically a socially okay Republican. Hey, he would bring that back. He would bring the Republican Party back to sanity. It would be a great person to run in a general election against President Bernie Sanders. Just saying. All right. Anyway, so there's a little bit of news from around the country, around the nation, if you will. Let's dive into some of the more prepared stuff. All right. Let's go to John Bolton. By the way, if you could, please like and share the stream. Super important that you do that. All right. It appears that John Bolton may be very eager to take out Donald Trump. Now, I mean that in a metaphorical sense, of course, because John Bolton now says he's ready to testify if called on by the Senate. So now this is according to reports that have just came out based on a statement that Bolton himself has put out. So now all they would have to do, the Senate would, is to hand him a subpoena. So now that is very unlikely to happen, as it's the people that are in control of the Senate, the Republicans, Mitch McConnell, that would be in charge of calling witnesses. So far, it doesn't look like McConnell, he doesn't want to call witnesses. He's not interested in this. However, the Democrats could, of course, come back around and say, okay, well, you know what? Let's add an article of impeachment and then subpoena John Bolton. I mean, if he's so interested in testifying, well, then do that and have him testify in the House. Fascinating. But anyway, so now let's go and get to this very interesting statement here. He said, quote, "During the president impeachment controversy, I've tried and met to meet my obligations both as a citizen and a former national security advisor. My colleague, Dr. Charles Cooperman, faced with a House committee's subpoena on one hand and a presidential directive not to testify on the other, sought final resolution to this constitutional conflict from the federal judiciary." So now let me stop there for a moment. Okay, so Cooperman was subpoenaed by the House to come and testify against Donald Trump in Ukraine. Donald Trump basically said, no, I'm not going to allow anybody to go testify. Well, look, I would consider that obstruction of justice, but that would just be me. And John Bolton says, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm barred from the White House. And so, by the way, the Democrats did not subpoena John Bolton because of this. So that's interesting. So the Cooperman case, also very interesting. So now this went to court. And so let me get back to more about Bolton's statement here. After my counsel informed me that House committee that I too seek judicial resolution of these constitutional issues, the committee chose not to subpoena me. Basically just, reiterating what I had mentioned, but in more legalese, I guess. Nevertheless, I publicly resolved to be guided by the outcome of Dr. Cooperman's case. So now Cooperman's case, by the way, went to court, and basically they decided, the judge, Richard Leon, said, look, I hear your arguments, and I'm just going to declare this entire thing moot. Now, what does that actually mean, right? Declared it moot. Basically, I'm not going to make a decision one way or the other. And so since it was declared moot, did not reach the separation of powers issues, meaning that, look, I can't say that the president can't block people from, testifying, but I can't say that he can too. I can't say that he can't. I'm just not, it's not my job to make a decision. Okay. So because of that, this did open the way for Bolton to be to be able to testify. So again, unfortunately, this is now since, well, look, the articles of impeachment have not been delivered to the Senate. So that's very interesting. So since it has not been delivered to the Senate, I would think that it was very likely that they could go back and they can add an article of impeachment onto it, maybe something a little bit more specific, and then say, hey, John Bolton, whatever you know, I'm going to subpoena you. And since the Cooperman case did not come up with any sort of resolution, he can't really say no. So this could be the chance for Bolton to go and testify against Trump. Now, why is that important? Because I believe that John Bolton has some possibly relevant information, right? So now before I get into that, let me give you a little bit more of a statement here. Bolton said the House has concluded its constitutional responsibility by adopting articles of impeachment related to the Ukraine matter, which, again, they could probably go back and add a few more since they haven't delivered it to the Senate yet. But he did say it now falls on the Senate to fulfill its constitutional obligation to try impeachments, and it does not appear possible that a final judicial resolution of the still unanswered constitutional questions can be obtained before the Senate acts. Accordingly, since my testimony is once again at issue, I've had to resolve the serious competing issues as best as I could. Based on careful consideration and study, I've concluded that if the Senate issues a subpoena for my testimony, I am prepared to testify. Well, now, again, there is one question here, right? So if the House goes back and drafts a new article, which again is probably unlikely, knowing who runs the House, Nancy Pelosi, would he be reticent to want to testify? It is interesting, the timing, right? But maybe that has nothing to do with it. Maybe I'm being a little too conspiratorial. But I think also, look, I think he's chomping at the bit. Okay, I think he does want to testify against Donald Trump, but I also think he's trying to play it sly. So he's trying to play like both sides here for a little bit. First by saying, well, look, I couldn't testify with the whole Cooperman thing. I had this White House order. I'm going to wait and see what happens. And now that, of course, Cooperman has been cleared to be able to testify, if it were still in the House, which it's not, again, curious timing. But look, hey, since we don't have any answer on that case, if the Senate wants to call me, well, I'm right here. I'm ready for it. And look, I think he's doing that and saying that to avoid inflaming conservatives, saying that, hey, look, if they call me, what am I going to do? I can't say no, but also saying, please pick me. I want to testify. I know it's strange that I can come to two different conclusions based on what he says, but I do think he is interested. Why? It's because he came out and made a statement about it. Why go public? Why say, oh, look, the thing that nobody was paying attention to, really, the whole Cooperman case, well, it's over, meaning that I can probably testify if you just give me a subpoena. I'm not saying you should give me a subpoena, but I'm saying that I'm absolutely ready for you to give me a subpoena. Come on, dude. He knows. Like, he wants to go. He wants to go. I'm saying that. And look, he's mentioned before, like he's actually quoted as saying he was not interested in being involved in the drug deal that was Ukraine, that they're cooking up. No, I'm not interested. I don't want to be involved in that. And that was shortly, of course, before he had resigned, right? That he was no longer part of the administration. And then he also has said that he has certain, or it's been implicated that he has certain information that might not be good for the president. So a couple of interesting things. So now, again, I don't think the Senate is going to allow any witnesses. This is up to Mitch McConnell now. And Mitch McConnell doesn't know that. Trump, look, I don't know, to be honest, because you never know what Trump is going to make a decision on. I mean, he could say one thing and then come back a couple days later and say, I didn't actually mean that. No, I don't want witnesses. Or maybe I do want witnesses. I don't know. You don't know because I don't know anything. Yeah, that's about what it's like dealing with Trump. It's enough to pull your hair out if you had any. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm really, really interested to see if Bolton knows anything. Again, I don't think it's going to change anything when it comes to impeachment. Nonetheless, it would be very, very interesting to hear what Bolton has to say. And, we'll see. I guess we'll just have to see. Okay. So let's go to sanctions here. So President Trump has just threatened to sanction the Iraqi government. So now this follows news that the Iraq's parliament had voted on Sunday to expel U.S. military forces from the country after the American airstrike that killed a top Iranian military commander. So now, by the way, the assassination happened in Iraq. So Iraq's like, yo, okay, that just happened in our backyard. We do not want that to happen here. We do not want you here. So now that's really interesting. So now, according to the AP, a non-binding resolution was passed on Sunday that demanded an end to foreign military presence in the country of Iraq, with the aim of forcing the U.S. to withdraw the nearly 5,000 troops that are still there. Now, after this assassination, and after the threat of retaliation from Iran, the administration has decided to send about 3,500 additional troops to the area. So instead of leaving, we're actually sending more people there. So now they say that, well, look, we don't need the United States here because we have an achievement of victory, they said, in stopping the Islamic State. By the way, the Islamic State is still there. In fact, our troops are no longer doing activities against the Islamic State in the area. So we're no longer fighting ISIS. So now the Kurds are no longer fighting ISIS. We're no longer fighting ISIS. So who's fighting ISIS? Nobody. So now they are allowed to go and regroup and rearm and, do whatever they're going to do, because now we're too busy worrying about a counterattack from Iran. Congratulations. This is what's going on here. Now, let's see. Because of this, Iraq says, well, we have ended our request for assistance from the U.S. in the fight against ISIS because, we've won, right? Okay. And now the Iraqi government, it says, must work to end the presence of any foreign troops on Iraqi soil and prevent them from using its land, airspace, or water for any reason. Now, airspace, very important, because even if we didn't have physical bases inside of Iraq, still, not being able to use their airspace to conduct raids against ISIS, probably not good in the fight against ISIS. So, fascinating. Now, I do have to note that it is, and I've said it before, it is non-binding. Why is it non-binding if they want us out of the country? Well, because if it were binding, then they would literally have to use their military forces to try to push us out of the country. And that would lead, of course, to all-out war. They're not going to do that. They know better than that. But the sentiment is there. They do not want us there anymore. And of course, it's because we lied to them, assassinated somebody right in their own backyard, somebody who, by the way, was allegedly seeking peace in the region. So now this comes from Max Blumenthal, writing for the Gray Zone. And he explained that Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi had planned to meet Soleimani on the morning that the general was killed to discuss a diplomatic rapprochement that Iraq was brokering between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So Iraq, being a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Ooh, you know who wouldn't like that? Us, the United States. Not only that, but Israel probably wouldn't like it either. So now, Abdul Mahdi had said that Trump had personally thanked him for his efforts, even as he was planning a hit on Soleimani, thus creating the impression that the Iranian general was safe to travel to Baghdad. So, in effect, luring the general to a predetermined location at a predetermined time to then launch an assassination strike against the general. So, meaning that this has been planned for quite some time. And on a day that they allegedly are doing peace. So, that's fascinating. If true, devastating. So, now, again, who loses out if Saudi Arabia and Iran become a little bit more friendly? Again, the oil companies, defense contractors, the right-wing government of Israel, Netanyahu specifically, who, by the way, said, "Oh, we don't want to get dragged into this. We're not involved. We did not do that bombing." Okay, sure. But look, here's the thing: when there is conflict and uncertainty in any place, the right wing thrives. It's as true in the United States as it is in Israel. So let's be honest about that. The right wing, of course, benefits from war. It benefits from political instability. So if that's true, by the way, this completely destroys Trump's justification for that airstrike. So now, it's not a surprise that al-Mahdi, of course, and the Iraqi government wants us out. In fact, according to Reuters, al-Mahdi told Parliament, despite the internal and external difficulties that we might face, it remains best for Iraq on principle and practicality. So how did Trump take this? Well, not well. So now, Trump spoke to some reporters on Air Force One, and this is what he said, quote, "If they do ask us to leave, if we don't do it in a very friendly basis," makes no sense, "we will charge them sanctions like they've never seen before, ever." Oh, God, he's a child. He said, quote, "It'll make the Iranian sanctions look somewhat tame." So wait, no. Understand what he's saying. If Iraq, as a democracy, says, we do not want America in our country anymore, we don't want American troops in our country anymore, don't worry, we got this. So please leave because you're making everybody here very, very uncomfortable. Just go, right? Go back home. Do the thing that you said you were going to do, by the way, and ending to forever wars. Well, we don't need you anymore, so just leave. And Trump says, I don't want to. I want to stay here forever. And if you try to make us leave, well, then, you know, we're going to do sanctions on you worse than Iran. I mean, that's amazing. What in the hell? What is going on in his tiny little pea brain? I don't understand. And look, I'd just be like, all right, fire Trump. All right, let's leave and then come back and say, I've ended the forever wars. ISIS is beaten so much to the fact that we didn't need to be in Iraq anymore. And they said, we don't need you. So I ended the forever war. Campaign promise complete. I mean, there's got to be some way that you can spin this. And of course, later on, he probably will. Like, I can almost guarantee that I ended the war in Iraq. I got all of our troops home. All right. But look, our troops really are. By the way, Trump had also promised not to just do sanctions against Iraq, but also to bomb Iran's cultural heritage sites. That is a literal war crime. So he's promising war crimes, and he's promising to sanction our allies. I mean, this is a ridiculous. What a monster. All right. So now, he also said, quote, if there's any hostility, that they do anything we think is inappropriate, we are going to put sanctions on Iraq, very big sanctions, and then added, we have an extraordinarily expensive airbase that's there. It cost billions of dollars to build, long before my time. We're not leaving unless they pay us back for it. Why should they pay us when we literally invaded their country without them wanting us to be there in the first place? Again, we just stroll in and say, we're just going to invade your country and we're going to do regime change and we're going to create all this instability in this country. And it's going to lead to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dead civilians. And then we're going to build this gigantic airbase and we're going to charge you for it if you want us to leave. Jesus Christ, dude. You've got to be kidding me. They're supposed to be our allies. We actually are supposed to have made a democracy there. Well, that democracy just said and just took a vote and said, we don't want you here. So maybe we should go. Maybe we should get out of there. I mean, look, again, I don't think we should be in Iraq or Afghanistan. Okay, yeah, like ISIS, right? ISIS is our fault. It's kind of our fault to begin with, right? Had we not invaded Iraq in the first place, there wouldn't be an ISIS. But now, of course, they're saying, look, we got ISIS under control now, so just go, just leave, please. All right. So look, it's called democracy, and like it's a sad day for you, right? They took a vote, and hey, guess what? The democracy we created in Iraq works. Ironically, mission accomplished. Let's get the troops home. Let's not put sanctions on our allies for reacting to something that we did. I mean, all this shows that we just have a complete and utter moron, an idiot running our government. Scary stuff. All right. So I'm going to come back with a little bit more detail on a story after this break, of course. I mentioned an article from the Gray Zone by Max Blumenthal. And so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that and the possible peace mission that Soleimani allegedly was on. So that's a fascinating story. Buckle up, and we'll get to that right after the break. Around the Nation.
Mike Pounds.
Welcome back to the show. On the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so we got one comment here that I want to read that I think was really good. Sarge Tech member says, Trump has actually supercharged Iran's nuclear efforts. Thanks, Trump. Yeah, I read that story earlier. And it's enraging. So now, look, we had a nuclear deal with Iran that would have prevented them from getting a nuclear weapon. Now that not only did we rip up the deal, but we also assassinated the number 2 man in Iran, well, now they're like, oh, Iran deal. No, thanks. We're actually going to develop nuclear weapons. Why? I actually think it's more of a deterrent than anything. Because if they think, well, if America is just going to be able to strike our people, even if it's in Iraq, well, then we got to defend ourselves because war's coming. And so that's a disastrous thought. And it's, look, and here's the thing. They probably think, well, there's precedent, right? So, for example, Libya had nuclear weapons. We were able to get Gaddafi to give up those nuclear weapons, and then an international coalition, of course, bombed the crap out of Libya. And, of course, Muammar Gaddafi did not survive that. Ended up getting a pole rammed up his behind. And so, not good. Very bad. And so they look at that, but then they also look at North Korea and how we haven't touched North Korea because they have nuclear weapons. So basically, that's the only thing that will prevent the United States from invading. And so they think, okay, we got to hurry up and get the nukes, which is a terrible idea because I actually think that the world should have less nuclear weapons. I'm sort of uncomfortable with the idea of having a weapon and having a stockpile of weapons that could annihilate the entire population of the Earth several hundred times over. It's a pretty disturbing thought. And so, if you want to denuclearize Iran, bad idea. You just did the complete opposite. Congratulations. Disastrous. All right. Anyway, so now let me thank some patrons here. Patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank Jorge Hago and Liliana Flores. Also, thank you to Mike Murdoch as well. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can support independent progressive media. Could not do this show without you, especially since we're delisted, demonetized, possibly even blacklisted. We do not get recommendations that go out to people anymore. Very, very rarely. Right? Do I get a recommendation myself on YouTube from for a lefty YouTuber? So any way that you can help us is definitely appreciated. In fact, we also have another way, than just Patreon. We also have the channel membership through YouTube. Become a channel member by hitting the join button below. I want to thank, of course, Chai M and Eddie B 2001. So channel member, again, bottom of the screen, join button, help independent progressive media. All right. That said, let's get into the rest of the story. Now, following the U.S. assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, the Trump administration basically sent out Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to claim that Soleimani was, quote, actively planning to attack American interests in the region before he was killed. So that's one of the reasons they were going with. Also, another one of the reasons they went with before that was, well, it's in retaliation to a militant raid on our forces, and we think that those militants are linked to Iran. Okay. So now Trump himself later on said that Soleimani was planning imminent attacks on U.S. diplomatic facilities and personnel across the Middle East. Now, where's the evidence of that? Well, they didn't have any. Soleimani actually was focused on fighting against ISIS. So he wasn't focused on attacking American forces. In fact, the reason that he had gained so much notoriety inside of Iran is because of his fight against ISIS. Now, that's not me saying that he's a great guy. I'm just pointing out the fact that he fought ISIS. Now, nonetheless, Trump claimed that this action was to stop a war. In fact, he said, quote, "We did not take action to start a war." It's kind of funny. I mean, a little counterintuitive. If you want to stop a war, you don't actively bomb someone. I'm just saying. Assassinating someone rarely tends to prevent wars. I mean, look, if you doubt me, just ask Archduke Ferdinand how that turned out. Nonetheless, if you don't know, that's, of course, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand started World War I. History junkies, come on. All right, anyway. Nonetheless, you had this narrative that was played out all over the media, right? Without evidence, right? Our intelligence agencies made the claim, and they said, yes, he was planning attacks all over against our forces. Which, by the way, who put our forces there? We did. They didn't. So maybe we should not have our forces there. But okay, anyway. The other thing about that is that it's the same kind of thing that we saw in the lead up to Iraq. Oh, they're going to attack our forces. They're going to attack us in the United States. Saddam has links to Al Qaeda. Completely wrong. He hated Al Qaeda. And so we've seen that movie before. And of course, that movie went terribly, terribly. So I do not take a lot of stock in our intelligence agencies unless, of course, you have receipts, unless you have some sort of proof, right? Now, the Trump administration is taking the opposite route, only believing in the intelligence community when they don't have proof. So, but of course, when has not having proof ever stopped us from going to a war? Now, let me go to here's an example of just how obstinate they are, and how they just want to get this war thing just going, right? Now, on a January 3rd State Department briefing where reporters got the chance to ask for evidence, one official erupted in anger. He said, quote, "Jesus, do we have to explain why we do these things?" Why, yes. Yes, you do. Because we kind of live in in a democracy. And so, yes, we would like to know why you're trying to get us into another war. It would be nice to have some proof, right? But of course, as Condoleezza Rice kind of put it, and I'm going to paraphrase here, hey, man, the smoking gun will be a mushroom cloud. Right. Okay. That means, of course, they have no proof, but we do have a little bit of information which could disproves Trump's narrative. So now this is according to Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi. Now, the Iraqi Prime Minister is supposed to be our ally, right? The country of Iraq is supposed to be our ally, work together to fight against ISIS. And so, look, you believe him or not, right? This is what he's saying. Abdul Mahdi said he had planned to meet Soleimani on the morning that the general was killed to discuss a diplomatic rapprochement that Iraq was brokering between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, could you imagine Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia kind of becoming friendly, right? And trying to stabilize the region. Now, I think the State Department saw that and it lit their hair on fire. Oh my God, no, we can't have these guys working together. What are you doing? No. This would be terrible for our foreign policy, which our foreign policy is basically we go and invade countries for natural resources, for oil, for corporations, and then we continue to spend more and more money and increase the defense budget so that these same corporations, the defense contractors, keep getting money, keep getting rich. That's how we're doing these things. That's how this thing is done, right? So now, right now, we actually do have a deal with the Saudis. We ignore their terrorism, and they are a state sponsor of terrorism. 15 out of the 19 hijackers in 9/11 were Saudis. they practice and spread the most fundamentalist strain of Islam. That's Wahhabism, right? And so they're responsible for a lot of the terrorism in the region. But since we buy cheap oil from them, we ignore all that stuff. We ignore the fact that they kill people for apostasy, that they cut off people's hands and they cut off their heads, and they kill people for witchcraft and homosexuality, things like that. But hey, look, they sell us cheap oil, so we're just going to ignore all the terrible stuff they do. But anyway, now Saudi Arabia is supposed to be our ally, but of course they're not a very good one, because they do happen to kill U.S.-based journalists. For example, Jamal Khashoggi, who was literally dismembered inside of a Turkish embassy. So, yeah. Now, nonetheless, they're supposed to be our ally. Iraq is also supposed to be our ally, right? Now, that works out for us. That also works out for Israel, because then we're all supposed to be against Iran. So how would you stop that? How would you stop Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq suddenly becoming more friendly, getting on better terms? Well, you sabotage the process. So now, if it's true, with the U.S. trying to sabotage the process, then it's huge. It would mean that we bombed a guy who allegedly was trying to stabilize the Middle East, because it's not politically convenient for the U.S. and our financial interests, as well as the interests of Israel and the Israeli right wing, more specifically. Now, this is on the word, again, of the Iraqi prime minister. So now, Abdul Mahdi also said that Trump personally thanked him for the efforts to create peace, even as he was planning the hit on Soleimani. So again, Trump had known about this. The State Department had known about their efforts to try and broker a peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and knew about Iraq's role in that. Now, this created the impression that the Iranian general was safe to travel to Baghdad. So, excuse me. So that would be like basically luring him in to a predetermined time and place so they could do a drone strike on him and make sure that they got him. Because there are several times, of course, that Soleimani had been attacked and considered dead to just reappear somewhere else. So what better way to do this than, of course, pre-plan it when he's trying to do the auspices of peace? So, man. So now this came from, this is a quote from Abdul Mahdi, and it was tweeted out by Mustafa Salim. He said, quote, "I was supposed to meet Soleimani at the morning the day he was killed. He came to deliver me a message from Iran, responding to the message we delivered from Saudi to Iran." So now, again, if this is a peace mission, or it was a peace mission, then we just committed one of the worst acts. I know the justification, of course, well, he's a bad guy. He fought Americans and he killed Americans. Okay. That was, of course, during the Iraq War. Yes, his forces attacked our soldiers. Who put our soldiers there? Oh, right, we did, when we illegally invaded a country based on false pretenses. So we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Nonetheless, okay, I still don't like the fact that he attacked and killed our troops, of course. But, I mean, it is the nature of war that we attack them, they attack us, on and on. So now, as far as him being a bad guy, right? Well, so is Duterte, the leader of Philippines, right? So is Kim Jong-un. Vladimir Putin, also a bad guy, right? So do we go and bomb those people too because they're bad people? There's kind of a reason that we don't. It's because we don't want to start wars with every single country and kill every single bad person out there, because it would create even worse conditions. Now, Trump, again, also doesn't seem to have an issue with a lot of those guys. In fact, he seems to prefer the company of dictators. That said, this action should also be reminding people of the assassination of Mullah Akhtar Mohammed Mansour. Now, if you hadn't heard of him, I understand that. However, Let me give you some details about him. Now, this was back in 2016. This was during the Obama administration. Mansour was a Taliban leader in Afghanistan, but he was different from most of the other hardline Taliban. He actually wanted to negotiate a peaceful end to the U.S. occupation in Afghanistan. So, look, that entire war, and we found this, of course, we knew this for a while, but it was confirmed when the not Pentagon, but Afghanistan papers came out, that we had essentially been lied to that entire war as well, and that we were there for essentially no reason. Bin Laden was in Pakistan, wasn't in Afghanistan, and when he was, we had him cornered in Tora Bora, and we just let him go. So now the Obama administration, instead of doing actual peace deal and getting our troops out of Afghanistan, instead, we drone striked Mansour and killed him, which, of course, had the result of empowering the hardline figures in the Taliban, which led in an increase of violence against our troops in the country. So that led to even more death and more targeted attacks against our soldiers. That's what happens. So, but look, that was during the Obama administration. Now we have Donald Trump, who is even worse. And so we're there basically forever. Donald Trump wants to keep us in Iraq forever, as well as Mike Pompeo. And now we're doing the same thing in Iraq. I mean, it's a disaster. And so you know that, by the way, what doing this makes Donald Trump, other than, of course, a murderer, makes him a liar. Remember, he campaigned against forever wars. I mean, he even tweeted out, very famously, that Obama was going to start a war with Iran to boost his sagging poll numbers during an election year. Well, now we're in an election year. Donald Trump has pretty terrible poll numbers, and now we're doing the same thing, threatening to start a war with Iran. But here's more information. Now, according to certain officials, Pompeo has been pushing this for quite some time. In fact, he pitched assassinating Soleimani to Trump months ago. And in the wake of the general's killing, the U.S. official revealed to the New York Times that the NSA had intercepted communications the United States had between Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and General Soleimani. So now, what did that intercepted information reveal? We're going to be shocked to find out that it revealed that there was no imminent attack by Soleimani on our forces. No imminent attack, no justification, no reason, and worse, during an alleged mission of peace in the area. If you wonder why people in that part of the world hate us, well, it's not because of our freedom. It's not because they hate us because they hate us. No, it's because we have a history of constant meddling in that region and doing things exactly like this. All right. Moving on. All right. We got more. Now, following the assassination of a top Iranian general, there are a lot of members of Congress. They're suddenly concerned about Donald Trump's war powers in the region. Now, I say suddenly because, as I've pointed out many times, Democratic politicians have continuously voted to give Trump more and more power, both more power and money to perform military strikes, money for the military. Now, some Democrats are on the right side, and they are pushing to restrict some of that power. Now, this is Democratic Representatives Barbara Lee and Ilhan Omar. Now, they have just announced a war powers resolution in the House on Sunday as a companion bill to one introduced by Senator Tim Kaine on the Senate on Friday. Now, Omar said in a statement, quote, "Let's not mince words. The assassination of Qasem Soleimani was an act of war undertaken without congressional authorization, in violation of the Constitution of the United States of America." So unconstitutional, right? Now, She also says, we in Congress must exercise our constitutional duty and do everything in our power to stop another disastrous war. I absolutely agree. Now, Ilhan Omar, by the way, she's been excellent when it comes to voting against things like the NDAA, Donald Trump's war budget, and Barbara Lee, of course, if you can remember, she was the only member of Congress to not vote against the to vote against the authorization of military force in Afghanistan. So she voted against. She was the sole member to vote against authorizing George W. Bush the ability to make war. So, look, not even Bernie Sanders can say that. And he came out later and said, I was absolutely wrong on that vote. So, look, on the issue of war and budgets, those two have been really, really good. Now, the rest of the Democratic Party, not so good. Now, in her statement, Congresswoman Lee said it was beyond time that lawmakers in Washington do their duty to rein in Donald Trump. And she said, make no mistake, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani places us on the brink of war with Iran. Trump's reckless military actions without congressional approval or authorization have caused this crisis. She also mentioned how we have been down this road before when it came to Iraq and cannot afford another ill-advised, destructive, and costly war in the Middle East. It is past time for Congress to reassert our constitutional authority and return to diplomacy with Iran and our allies. So, now, those aren't the only one that have introduced legislation. You also have Senator Bernie Sanders working together with Ro Khanna to introduce a separate bill that would bar any Pentagon funding for military force in or against Iran without congressional approval. So now these are the heroes, right? These are some of the biggest anti-war voices on the progressive left. Now, here comes Nancy Pelosi, right? So now Nancy Pelosi, she says, well, a War Powers Act? Yes, I am in favor of a War Powers resolution. According to the Speaker, the resolution the House will vote will be similar to the resolution introduced by Kaine in the Senate. It reasserts Congress's long-established oversight responsibilities by mandating that if no further congressional action is taken, the administration's military hostilities with regard to Iran cease within 30 days. Okay, so he can still do it, but, he's got 30 days, right? So now, we don't know the language in Pelosi's resolution either. And that has me very, very concerned because Pelosi has been actually pretty terrible on this, her record, right? For example, she has voted in favor of giving Donald Trump more money to the military, increasing the military budget, and, of course, his Space Force, and continuing to extend war powers that he should not have, that no president should have. And by the way, Obama shouldn't have had that authorization as well. And so during the Obama years, the president's power, when it came to conflict, when it came to war, has been increased. And now, of course, we warned against that because, of course, someone like Donald Trump could come in and do the very same thing that he had just done. It's amazing nobody saw this happen. But, okay. Now more. Now, let's compare Pelosi to Ro Khanna, for example. Now, Ro Khanna, during the NDAA fight, he got together and supported a bill with Matt Gaetz, of all people. Now, Matt Gaetz is a extremely conservative Republican. However, Matt Gaetz and Ro Khanna both agreed that Trump should not use federal dollars for military action against Iran without congressional approval. So that was an amendment, right? However, that and other amendments that might have stopped Donald Trump from doing this were eventually stripped out of the bill by Nancy Pelosi. So, excuse me why I don't trust Nancy Pelosi. Because every time a bill comes up that would, stop Trump's authority or limit his authority for war, Nancy Pelosi gets rid of it. She tanks it and says, oh, no, we're going to give the Republicans everything that they want and then exercise no leverage whatsoever. Because, no, they're not going to use it for terrible things. Oh, my God, I can't believe he just used it for terrible things. What are you doing? Now, I want to give you a great thread by Walker Bragman. So now, Walker, he points out how Pelosi specifically, not Ilhan Omar, not Barbara Lee, because they are the true anti-war voices on the left, but how Nancy Pelosi's sudden adoption of the War Powers Act is just kind of a kabuki theater kind of ploy. Now, and he points it out in these tweets. He said, Dems allows the defense budget to pass without two necessary amendments, the Kana amendments, repealing the 2002 Iraq authorization of military force, and the other requiring congressional authorization for funding actions against Iran. Had they been in place, would have placed Trump's assassination of Soleimani on dubious ground. As it stands, Trump's strike was likely legal, probably authorized by the authorization of military force because of where it occurred in Iraq. And without Congress signaling disapproval for actions against Iran, at worst, he could be said to have been acting in the zone of twilight, constitutional gray area. Bragman continues. He said, when Congress requires authorization for an action and the president does not seek it before acting, his action is likely to be held unconstitutional under the analysis from Youngstown Steel. The amendments may not have stopped Trump, but with them, it's a new ballgame. The point is, Democrats royally screwed up again. They had leverage and an opportunity to take a stand. They caved. Trump got more money for defense with Pelosi in charge of the House than he did with Paul Ryan was Speaker. No strings attached. Once again, a disaster caused by the right is written in the ink of liberal weakness. Now, that, of course, is devastating. But where's the lie? Again, there are great people here that are fighting against this war. Ilhan Omar, Barbara Lee, Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna. They've been trying to limit Trump's power to make wars. And every time they are thwarted by Nancy Pelosi and the establishment, which are the same people, by the way, that are saying how dangerous Donald Trump is. He must be removed. He must be impeached. He cannot be allowed to win elections. And yet, they are doing things to give Trump more power and more money to make war. It's ridiculous. And it's because it's a game. For example, defense contractors give money to both sides. Excuse me. Getting a little thirsty here. But basically, they have been convinced by defense contractors that war is the only way and that they must have more money, endless money for endless war. And so I'm afraid that this will either go nowhere or will be watered down so much that it will be completely ineffectual. I hope I'm wrong, but so far, the Democrats' track record on this is not good. All right. Excuse me. I must be coming down with something. All right. That's all I got. That's all the time I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Please subscribe. Become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. See y'all tomorrow.